Merlin, if I am to die in battle, please do not let me die bewildered. Merlin! Merlin! In whatever cave you hide, whatever in God's kingdom you slumber, I command you to take me back to the beginning. Take me back to the beginning.
We've all heard of King Arthur. Whether it's through a book, a Disney movie, or a weird anime video game where he's a woman for some reason, we all know the story. A boy pulls a sword out of a stone and becomes the king of Britain, establishes a congregate of strong and powerful knights, and is killed by his son Mordred. In 1959, lyricist Alan J. Lerner and composer Frederick Loewe decided to adapt Arthur's legend as a musical. Interestingly, they didn't use actual Arthurian legend as the base, instead opting to adapt the story of the 1958 novel The Once and Future King. Lowe initially didn't want anything to do with the project, and said that if it went poorly, it would be the last piece of music he ever wrote. The production faced many obstacles, like Lerner's wife leaving him while he was writing it. They managed to secure an all-star cast with the likes of Richard Burton and Julie Andrews. The musical actually begins at the end of the story, with King Arthur about to do battle. He demands that Merlin take him back to the beginning. The scene changes and we see a younger Arthur baby-raging to Merlin about his arranged marriage. Merlin leaves, leaving Arthur to whine all on his own. He gets frightened by Guinevere and hides, while Guinevere sings about how she doesn't want to get married. Arthur tries to come out of his hiding spot and jump scares her, and they take all of 5 minutes to fall madly in love, with Arthur pretending to not be the king. They get caught smooching, and Arthur is revealed as the king of Camelot, and that Guinevere is actually the woman he's supposed to marry. Time skip forward 5 years to Arthur establishing the Round Table, a fellowship of knights devoted to justice. Knowledge of the Round Table's excellence spreads all across Europe, and eventually reaches the medieval Mary Sue himself, Lancelot de Luc. Old Lancy Boy arrives to Camelot's May Day festival with Arthur, and immediately begins chatting up his wife. Unimpressed with Lancelot's story of how great he is and how he's cooler than everyone else there, Guinevere convinces 3 of the Round Table's knights to challenge him to a joust. Lancelot clutches the 3v1 and beats one guy so badly people think that he's dead, and then he tricks the crowd into believing he resurrected him, and everyone claps. As Lancelot leaves, he passes by Guinevere, and they take all of 3 seconds to fall madly in love. In the time that passes, Arthur, who unlike most versions of the story, actually isn't an idiot and realizes that his wife is in love with Lancy Boy, and he decides to sit back and just hope it blows over. So naturally, several years later, nothing has changed, and his wife is arguably more in love with his second-in-command and tries to get him to leave Camelot so that she doesn't cheat on Arthur. And life goes on business as usual until Arthur's bastard son Mordred comes to Camelot. Mordred's connection to Arthur and actual legend is pretty weird, because sometimes he's Arthur and Guinevere's son, sometimes he's Arthur's nephew, and sometimes he's a weird incest baby. For the musical, though, he's just Arthur's son from some random lady. It's never said when he's born. I'm assuming it's pre-Guinevere because of how hard the musical craps on her for cheating on Arthur. It'd be pretty weird if their perfect little boy was a cheater as well. Mordred, being the absolute menace he is, devises a plan to get rid of Arthur and take the throne for himself. He gets Arthur to go off on a hunting trip and uses that time to turn all of his knights against him, and convinces Lancelot and Guinevere to finally get down and dirty. Mordred waits until they're in the middle of the act to storm their chambers and arrest Guinevere for treason, with Lancelot escaping. Once Guinevere is about to get executed, Lancelot comes in and saves her. Arthur, conflicted about every detail of these events, is forced to wage war on Lancelot for his honor and that of Camelot. They fight, and eventually Arthur is left with Lancelot and Guinevere, and he lets them go because he can't bring himself to kill them. Arthur meets Lerner and Lowe's Arthurian OC Tom, who he sends to England to teach people about the meaning of chivalry and help create a better future. The show first premiered in the Majestic Theater on December 3rd of 1960. It ran for 873 performances until January 5th, 1963. It had mostly positive reviews while it was running, but its significance wouldn't truly come until November of 1963. The character of King Arthur was one of President John F. Kennedy's main inspirations, with JFK trying to emulate his kindness and leadership as he took on more power. Camelot came out the same year that JFK got elected, and he quickly grew a fondness for it. He particularly liked the closing lyrics of the musical. Camelot has since become a symbol for his presidency, as the perfect on the outside, ugly on the inside portrayal of the royals was very similar to the actual Kennedy family. The musical had a strong anti-war message, with Arthur's main motivation for even establishing the Round Table being his wish for a kinder and more righteous type of knight. The musical also tackles infidelity with the characters of Lancelot and Guinevere, which is still an incredibly taboo topic at the time. One could also see the character of Mordred as an allegory for the concept of revolution, as his whole purpose in the musical is to overthrow King Arthur. While the musical's strong anti-war message resonated with audiences everywhere, it had no foreign impact the way it did for audiences here in the US at the time, especially with its story of a great leader whose story got cut short.
By 8 a.m., the morning fog had flown. Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief shining moment that was known as Camelot.
But enough of the boring informational crap. Let's get to the fun stuff, shall we?